I recall this particular patient who said like, hey, I have a neighbor, he's very handsome, like, he doesn't have a girlfriend, are you interested? Then I told her I have to ask my husband for permission first.
What is it like to be able to help people who are critically ill? While we may not see them as often, there is a team of allied health professionals working tirelessly to care for their patients at every hospital. In this episode of Can Ask Me, I speak to 3 such professionals to find out why they've chosen to make this their life's work.
Do you come face to face with death often? I would say quite often, yes, in my line of work. I basically work with cancer patients. Sometimes they may be newly diagnosed and sometimes they may be at a terminal stage of their illness. It's common to hear the question, why me? Why now? Does this change the way, I live or who I am?
I would say I face death more often than I would like. We can lose more than 1 patient in a shift. I work in the intensive care unit where we see many critically ill patients. They are unable to breathe on their own. That's where we come in to assist them by putting in a breathing tube down their throat.
When you're diagnosed, suddenly treatment moves very fast. Sometimes patients and their family members, they don't really have time to process through what's happening. They don't know where to go for help. So as a medical social worker, some of the areas that we help them with is assessing financial resources to help with their medical treatment or their care. And we also provide emotional as well as social support. I'm there to just be with the patient as they go through this journey.
Yeah, some patients really surprise you. Like sometimes I think that they have 9 lives. You would think like they will not come back from this, but some of them, they really do like turn the corner, Life surprises you sometimes.
Sometimes we do come face to face with death because we do scan for road traffic accidents, cancer patients, stroke patients. I actually do scans and take x-rays of the patient so that doctors can actually diagnose and treat the patients.
It doesn't get easier even though like we have seen it so much. I spend the final few moments of my patient together with her. Unfortunately, her family members did not make it down to see her, so I held her hand and let her know that she wasn't alone, and I felt very emotional. Like, I remember I cried after that, but I also feel like it's an honor to be able to be in a position where I can be by their side in their final few moments.
So why should I trust you since you're not a doctor? Everyone is an expert in their own field.
Sometimes when I tell people that I'm a respiratory therapist, then they'll be like, huh? What job is this?
So people will say, you're just a medical social worker, what can you do for me? So I think part of it is also explaining to patients and caregivers, about what our role involves.
Sometimes when we do scans for the patient, we might find incidental findings like cancer or fractures. So these type of cases, the earlier the detection, the better, the higher chances of the patients to survive.
There was a man who was referred to me because he wasn't turning up for his appointments. He had advanced colon cancer. So I actually went down to his house a few times to try to talk to him. And he told me that he was concerned about continuing with treatment because he was worried about the financial costs. He didn't have family members or friends, so I think he felt quite alone. I pursued it, and then eventually he did turn up. And after that, whenever he saw me, he tended to be very emotional, and he would always refer to me as his 贵人, like benefactor. I think these are moments that really remind me of the impact of my work. Yeah.
Is your workplace depressing at times? Death is never a happy sight, and especially if you have cared for that patient for like quite a while already. I think those are like the hardest.
Sometimes I get emotional when it involves young patients that we know that there might not be any hope for them. The baby was only a few days old. There wasn't really much hope for the patient. I think I can understand, or I can actually put myself in the patient's shoes, because my baby also has to undergo a scan. It kind of pulls on your heartstrings, I guess. Yeah. And I guess only a parent would know how much it hurts lah. Yeah.
People always think that when you are caring for the critically ill, it's always sad and depressing and difficult. But it's not always that way. As a social worker, you ask a lot of questions about their lives, so sometimes they want to know about yours also. And I recall this particular patient who said like, hey, I have a neighbor, he's very handsome, like, he doesn't have a girlfriend, are you interested? Then I told her I have to ask my husband for permission first. So, there are all these moments, which makes work a bit more exciting sometimes.
Sometimes you get really good colleagues, you get really good partners, and lets you know that you still have colleagues to support you and stuff like that.
I think when I first came in, I was very caught up in I guess the hustle and bustle of, being part of the resuscitation efforts. But nowadays, I find myself being more appreciative of the small things. I had this uncle, at that time he was in our ICU for around 6 months. He was paralyzed neck down. Finally one day he was stable enough, so what we did was actually we brought him out. That was the brightest smile I've seen on his face for 6 months. So to be able to witness that was a very amazing feeling.
Do you have any regrets at work? No, not really. It's been very inspiring because I see patients who are very ill and how they deal with the most vulnerable moments in their life. There are patients who will look at me and say, don't feel so sad, I'm okay, everything is okay. And I think from then it left a deep impression on me. The fact that someone is going through so much and they can still extend care and concern towards you. And over time you realize that people they make their own peace and they're able to carry it on their own. It makes you think a lot about yourself as well. If I'm ever at that stage in my life, would I be as kind, as open? Yeah.
Sometimes we work day shift, sometimes we work night shift, and we always have to work weekends, holidays. I don't think I would call them regrets. I think at the end of the day, I do it for my patients.
I don't think I have any regrets joining healthcare. It was my own personal experience that actually made me want to join healthcare. So I was really close with my maternal grandmother, and at that point in time, she kept going in and out of ICU. That was my earliest contact with terminal illness and death, I guess. That's when I actually wanted to join healthcare. I guess I've fulfilled that being an allied health professional. At some point, I would like to think that I made an impact in the patient's life.
I recall there was a patient in her 30s. She was at a critical stage of her illness. And I spent some time talking to her and we talked about what her preferences were for her last rites as well. She also sensed that her family members had a hard time accepting that her time may be short. And that was why it was difficult for them to broach the topic with her. So being able to be this bridge is very important because you can help them achieve the closure as well.
I think through my job, I realized that we often get caught up thinking about what may happen in the future or what we did in the past. But I think now I learned to treasure the moment right here, right now.
I've learned from this job that life is unpredictable and death is also a normal cycle of life. I think that this is a path that I've chosen and it is meaningful for me, which is why I'm still here. And that is something that I remind myself every day.